Okay, looks like quite a few people thought this one was pretty darn difficult. Um, can someone translate that into like more targeted question? One of the people who thought who said I'm so lost or it was really hard. Um, where did the confusion lie? Yeah. Okay. So some of the feedback people are sending me, Stevie says he's still confused about using the dot then method. Yeah, and yeah, that was a little introducing that in the lecture maybe wasn't all that relevant to the actual content, because in this case, a lot of that was handled for you by the middleware, the Redux Promise middleware. So you didn't actually need to specify or call .then and .catch methods. So apologies if that was a bit confusing where I like introduced that in the lecture, though those really are like one of the fundamental pieces of promises in general, just not so much in the sprint in particular. And then a lot more confusion with Redux in general and React, and stuff just hasn't fully solidified yet, which makes sense for sure. But yeah, honestly that's gonna linger for a little bit. But as you get more and more exposure to this stuff, hopefully it'll start to clear up. Okay, so let me share my screen and we'll walk through my solution implementation. So starting out in the main index.js file where you set up your store. In case you guys are wondering, index.js, what you're doing here with provider and wrapping your app inside of provider is you're giving your app component access to the central store, the central state that Redux maintains for you. So this should look exactly like how it looked like in the Redux lecture, in the Redux sprint, especially with the React DOM render call and passing in provider with the reducers, and create store with middleware, I think is new. Yeah, so this is new because we're adding in this one line of passing in and calling apply middleware with the Redux Promise middleware. Okay. Yeah, some people saying they had trouble getting to delete. If you already got to delete, then you're already on the extra credit, so you're already in a good spot. So I honestly would not worry too much if you were not able to finish one of the extra credit challenges. So yeah, only new line I think that should have been added here is this create store with middleware line. And this gives you access to all the stuff that Redux Promise provides with what I was telling you guys in the lecture. README I had for the project didn't ask for delete. Maybe you got an outdated one. I might have updated it a bit after you guys pulled in some cases. Anyway, we'll walk through that code. Okay. And now let's go into friends list. Sorry, no, we should go into app. Let's do this in order. Zoom screen a bit. Yeah. Anyone remember the Mac hotkey to zoom in your screen? I keep forgetting. Command plus plus. Okay. Is that better? Okay. Cool. Okay, so first off, in my app.js, I have the friends list component, which renders out each of the different friend components. So friends list in my implementation is the parent container, is the container class for the friend component. The friend component just does the rendering. Friends list contains the friends components and handles some state there and handling input and stuff like that. We'll get into that in a bit. So friends list over here, and then add friend, which is the component that holds all of the different input fields for this assignment. Okay. Now going into, let's go into friends list first. This a bit. So in here I have friends class, and this one is importing relevant actions, bind action creators, connect the friend component, and then get friends as an action. And then on mounting, once the mounting is completed, then I call the get friends function, which fetches all their friends from the server and then populates the store state with that data from the server. And then inside of the render method, I'm just inside of a UL passing in friends, which gets dropped in from props, mapping over this, and then putting them inside of the friend component. And then here you need to call map state to props, map dispatch to props. And this gives you access to the state that gets dropped in. So basically what map state to props is specifying is which part of the central store, so the central state, the central Redux state, which part of that state does this particular component require? And so you're specifying, because this component needs access to the friends array, and so you call it friends. This is the key for inside of this object, and then on your state tree, it's called state.friends, because that's one level inside of the top level of the state tree and just stored inside of a friends array. So again, from a high level, map state to props just specifies inside of this component which part of the state tree does this component require or need access to. And then map dispatch is how you kind of get access to the dispatch function, where you're binding the dispatch, because let me show that one. So that's not in here, that's inside of add friend. So add friend is the bar at the top that has all the different inputs. And so this one was, first off, I would never recommend this kind of like UI flow, this UX flow, because it's really terrible for usability from a user's perspective. But for this component, for this component, it's fine for this assignment. So an add friend, yeah. We need to, inside of state, keep track of all the different inputs that a user might give us inside of this component. And so inside state, I have name, age, email, and then index, which is specifically used for the put or the update method. We'll get to that in a bit. And then for each one of these different fields inside of state, you need a specific handle change. And so, for example, we have handle name change here. That is bound specifically to just the name input field. And so whenever the name input field gets updated, is a good practice to have a single component for add friend. You could split it up into 4 different inputs if you wanted to. Yeah, it's entirely up to you. I don't think there are too many pros and cons as to one way or the other. I suppose if you did each input box as a separate component, that's like more modular, which could be better if that's your preference. But really, it's yeah, it's mostly just up to your own preference. Like it doesn't affect functionality at all. So yeah, I have 4 different handle functions: handle, name, age, email, index. They all just pretty much do the same thing. They're just changing the state specifically for that field. So name, age, email, index, and then they're all bound to different input fields. So here's like the name input field, and this one has handle name change, age input field, handle age, email, index, index. So I think that should be relatively straightforward. And then you also need the submit functions for each of the different methods. So just in this case, post, put, and delete. So you'll need like a function that handles just submitting as a post request. You'll need one that handles, this is getting to the extra credit, updating for the put method, and then deleting for deleting. So we'll talk about specifically the new friend function was the only one that you are actually specifically asked to implement, not part of extra credit. So in this one is basically constructing a new friend object and grabbing that info from state. So I'm saying const new friend was just a plain object with name to be what is currently set as name in the state, age, email. So initializing that, and then the way you actually send off this object to the actions so that the action creators can do its job of actually sending off the action object to the reducers is calling this props dispatch. And then inside of dispatch, you specify which action creator function you want to call and then pass in the data in this case. So the new friend object. So yeah, this line here is how you go about actually sending off this piece of data to the other appropriate parts of Redux. And then here I am resetting each of the different state fields. So this is the only one you're actually required to implement. Let me answer some questions first regarding, or I'll get to the different components first, and then we'll circle back for extra credit stuff. So I think someone asked me initially why I'm not using inside of the constructor handle name change. Like I'm not using any calls to bind on this, which a lot of you guys use inside of your code, which is totally fine. But I just prefer when you're using the arrow syntax that actually just takes care of it for you. So you don't have to explicitly say inside of the constructor, bind this function to this class. And so this is my preferred method because this is just less code and you don't need to explicitly call bind in this case. Using arrow functions for the methods. Oh, really? Okay, well, you could then fiddle around the linter and disable that, or something of that sort. Some difference using ref and the local state. Ref as in the cool, like that shortcut. Which shortcut? Oh, just using arrow functions. Yeah, to not have to use bind. Yeah, exactly. Definitely my preferred way of doing it. As in the reference to the field. You're talking about the ref. Oh, right. So, yeah, that's another way to do it. It's a little less straightforward, I would say. And so, in this solution implementation of mine, I think it's just easier to show with the straightforward like methods of handling all the different input changes directly. You can use refs though, for sure. With map state to props, we're supposed to be using the constructor with this dot state. The store holds the state. Yeah, John. So with regards to your question, in this case, it's much easier to just store the state inside of this component. So basically, if you think about it, the state object here inside of add friend is only used within add friend. Like the rest of Redux has no need to keep track of that. So the life cycle basically of this state, like it's just when you add input, this will get updated, and then right as you press submit with up for the component, then it's cleared away. So it is easier in this particular case to just keep this state inside of the actual component itself instead of having it go through the entire Redux cycle, because then that's just kind of like unnecessary cycles that you're that is slowing down your app overall. So in this particular case, just easier to just keep it inside of the component, I would say. Just making sure it's the correct way. Yeah. The field stuff keeps a state, yeah, and then you could use refs to access that. Again, I think this is just more straightforward for like illustration purposes, though. Okay. And then last component is friend. And so friend here is just what we call a presentational component. I'm having it implemented as just a pure function with no class or nothing, none of that extra overhead on top. Yeah, specifying const friend, and then inside of the inputs, you give it the props that get handed down. In this case, I have friend and index, and then key, which you need to give to components that you iterate through, but then are not, these keys are not actually accessible. At least I don't think they're accessible from inside of the actual child component. So React uses these in order to help it figure out when to update as part of like when it diffs the virtual DOM and figuring out which components need to receive new data. So that's what key is for, but then you don't actually have access to it inside of the component itself because it's purely just used by React behind the scenes. And so if you want to like access to the index, you can just pass in another index prop and get access to it here. So that's what I'm doing here. And then yeah, again, I'm doing the same thing. Oh, you didn't actually need a key here. I'm not iterating. Oops. Huh, okay. Yeah, I think it should be fine. You won't get an error, or you won't get a warning if you do that. But then I'm using it here where it specifies which friend number inside of the actual UI, and then just grabbing the appropriate fields and then putting them inside of what's that called? Interpolating the strings inside of this string interpolation syntax, and then exporting that. Okay, and now let's go into the actions and the reducers. So here are the action creator. Here's the action creators file. Get friends, which you all should have seen already from the mini sprint. And then in add friend, this one if we remember from the add friend function here, we're passing off this new friend object. And so this corresponds to this friend data right here. It's exactly the same object. And so inside of the promise, inside the post call, you pass in this friend data. Because if you look at the Axios documentation, you can look at what each of the different request methods requires as input data. So with get, you just specify the URL and it gets the resource that's at that URL. With post, you need to give it the friend data that you actually want to post. And then with all of the, you just return the promise inside the payload, just like what's going on inside of get friends. And then reducers. So it's actually, the reducer here is much more straightforward than what would actually happen if we were doing a Redux application that didn't call a, didn't like have access to an external server. But in this case, because what's happening is, you can think of it as the server is now holding the state for our application, right? So if you guys have looked inside of the server.js file, and you guys definitely should as part of like this assignment, you just see we have like this hard-coded friends array inside of the server.js file, and this is what initially gets served to you inside the application, like right as when you start up the server. And so when you make a GET request to the server.js, to localhost 5000 /friends, it just fetches this friends array and just returns that over to you. So that's what's going on with this response.send friends. It just sends the friend array back to you. And then inside of post the data, post the new data you want to get posted, and then it updates the friend array. So we're doing the push here, friends.push, and then send the friends data back. And so inside this, at this point, when you're calling res.send with friends, this is the updated friends array. And so really you can think about the server as now storing our state, and then that gets sent back, and then the Redux state gets updated as a result of those calls, if that makes sense. So that's why here in the reducers, every single one of the cases for all the different actions is literally just return the state, or return the friends array that's inside of the server.js. Because you add friend, you call add friend, and makes the post request, the server updates itself in response, sends back the new array with the updated, with the new friend that you added in. And so here we're just calling, give me back the data that you got back in the response. And so that's the case with all of these. And so it won't normally be this straightforward if we were not using, like, accessing an external server. Or maybe, you know, there would be other processing that you'd have to handle in this case once you actually got the updated data back from the server. Using this approach, get friends. What exactly are you referring to? Just like this pattern? Well, we can move on if he wants to. Oh, that's it. Shouldn't be making requests on each operation. Yeah, as generally, if your application, when your application gets larger and larger, you do want to think about how to minimize the number of external requests you want to be making, because external requests to a server are generally more expensive than just like if you could get as much of the data back in, that you need in one call to an external server, and then doing as much as you can with that once it's like local on your machine, for example. So yes, generally you'd want to minimize the total number of requests that you would want to make as your application scales out. So that's the reducers, container component pattern, friends list. Yes, Patrick, friends list is considered a container in this case, because it's doing the fetching and then just passing that down to a dumb friend component. Typically, you would use any component that you see that uses class and that does some stuff, is implemented as a class because it needs some like of the methods that come associated with implementing a component as a class can generally be considered a container component. And then you would pretty much always have your dumb components be pure functional components, just like this one. Okay. Anyone have any questions there so far? So that's pretty much the non-extra credit part of the assignment. For those of you who said that that I'm stuck on this project or I have like no idea what I'm doing, okay. Does this help clear some stuff up for you guys? Line 4955, friends list. $49.50 reset components. I think you meant 31. Looks like you mean 31 with the map dispatch to props. Oh, add friend. 4955. Oh, okay. So this set state call literally just says, so if you think about how this function is executing at the very beginning, prevent default so that the page doesn't refresh when you hit the submit button, is how you would do that, is what this call is for. And then we construct this new friend object, because at this point, when new friend gets called, so we'll have something here like, for example, right? So you put this in to the input fields, and then you would want to add this friend. I don't have the server running right now, so I'll get to that in a bit. So this call isn't going to go through, but so the user would type this in, hit add, and then that would kick off the new friend function. And so at this point, our state object would have Bob24 and Bob at Bob.com inside of the appropriate fields. And so these will populate this new friend object and then call dispatch with the appropriate action and the data. And then once that gets dispatched so that our action creators receive that, then we no longer want, from a UI perspective, we no longer want this data to be in these input boxes anymore. And so we just clear off the state. And then this will clear off the input boxes because inside of inputs, the value is set at this .state dot whatever its field is. And so if you bind the value to the appropriate piece in state, then once you clear off the state, then the inputs as well will also clear out. So that's probably a good segue just into demonstrating the application in action. Close that one. Okay.
Hey, Sean.
Yeah, what's up?
Just out of curiosity, could you briefly touch on the difference between using map dispatch to props and just calling the action in Connect?
Oh,
because The only benefit I know is that you can rename your action in map dispatch to props. But other than that, I don't know what else is special about it.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's true. I guess I didn't really think of that in this case. I didn't like think too much about the trade-offs between using map dispatch to props and then just passing it inside of connect. That is probably more straightforward. And I think in this particular case, maybe I didn't need map dispatch to props. Yeah, that's a good point. So in certain cases, yeah, like Ty was saying, map dispatch to props is pretty much used to like kind of rename your action creators inside of the function if you want to do something like that. But I'm not doing that in this case. So yeah, I guess maybe there was no need to do this. And you would just inside of connect pass in the name of the action creator function. Yeah, I guess that's what's going on there. Thanks for that, Ty. Let's see. So
Yep.
okay, server's up and running. So again, let's just do this real quick. And then again, index is specifically for updating. We'll do that in a sec once we get to extra credit, but then we do the add, and then here, friend 6, the 6th friend, because there were 5 before, now Bob25 and bob@bob.com. And then Stevie, to answer your question, so yeah, once you hit add, then that clears out the input fields because these are tied to the state. You're tied to the state here, and you then clear that out. So that's how you like achieve that effect of once you hit the button, it'll empty out the input fields. Okay. If no one has any questions on, got it. Thanks. Cool. So no one has any questions on my solution implementation. We can talk a bit about the extra credit unless people have. Oh, yeah. I guess I didn't want to say again. For those of you who are stuck or thought this sprint was extremely difficult, does this clear stuff up for you guys, or are you guys still confused on what's going on with this assignment? Okay, doesn't seem like I'm getting any questions. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to talking a bit about the extra credit. So we'll talk about delete first. And I think someone pointed out earlier that they were able to implement delete, but it only deletes in a FIFO manner, meaning it deletes from the front of the array. So for example, we have Ben here as our first entry, and then when you hit the delete method, when you hit the delete button, it'll delete him first, and then go in a first in, first out fashion. And so Bob is the last one that gets deleted. And so I didn't actually know this about the way that Axios's delete is actually implemented. So initially I was thinking that you could pass in an index and then hit delete, and it would take that index and delete the entry at the specified index. So that's actually how I thought. Oh, yeah. Good call, Pat. Yeah, when I first like wrote out that extra credit challenge, I was like, oh, I was thinking that delete would take in an index and you could delete whichever field you wanted to. But it turns out with Axios's delete, that doesn't actually take in any parameters. So the way then that you implement it is you just call delete friend, don't pass it anything, and have it delete in a first in, first out fashion. One sec. Yeah, I'm gonna. writing another poll real quick. Okay. And also, again, you guys can definitely take a look inside of the server.js to see what the delete and update routes look like. So, yeah, delete just splices off the very first entry in the friends array. And I ended up having to do it this way because, again, delete doesn't take in any parameters. So if we go and look at actions, go look at the delete actions. I initially, tried doing something like passing in an index, and I had like index here, but that wasn't actually getting sent over to the delete route. Like the index wasn't making it there, and so that's when I found out that this axios.delete doesn't take in a second parameter when I looked at the documentation. So yeah, you have to do it like this, and so you can't actually pass anything to that route. And so, yeah, so this is what that would look like. Just delete till there's nothing there and keep going. And okay, and then let me restart the server so we have some stuff in the array again. Okay, and then for update, okay. So yeah, inside of update, the way this would work is you would specify like an index. Or perhaps we test taking out our constructors. You're talking about in friends list, like this? Yeah. So you're saying if I put tested taking out the constructor and stage as a component did mount. I mean, that's exactly what I have here as well. Does it get the state from the component did mount method? Yeah, so basically what's happening here is upon mounting, it's grabbing friends from the state tree, the Redux state tree, and then that gets dropped in here as props on this component, and that happens because of map state to props. So this is telling it, the state tree, that I want the friends array from the state in the state tree, and I want to call those friends. And then so here you have this.props.friends. So yeah, that's how these two are connected. And that's how you get access to the friends array, by using map state to props and without having a constructor or anything of that sort going on here. Yeah, so cool. So let's say I wanted to update Ben, then you would have to specify an index of 0, because right now we're adding 1 to each of these so that it's more readable and not it's not 0 indexed. So 0 means the very first entry, and so that would be Ben in this case. So you can do stuff like, let's update his age, and you can keep his email the same, I guess, and then update, and there we go, we have the age updated. So it would again, the UI for this is really finicky, because you would have to enter, like if there's a field you didn't want change, you still have to enter it again the same way. Yeah, it's finicky, but for illustration purposes. And so what's going on here is inside of add friend, inside of this update friend function, what we're doing here is first off doing a check to ensure that this .state.index has something inside it, because if you don't pass anything into here, then it doesn't know which entry to update. So I'm doing this check first, so you don't put anything in there. It will just short circuit and not go on to the rest. And then like in the new friend function where we're constructing this new friend object, basically doing something very similar here with a bit of a different shape. And so we're handing it the index as well. And I'm just doing a parse int on this.state.index because this.state.index is a string and I want it given to server.js as a number. And so that's what parse int is doing here, is just turning the number, the string into an actual integer. And then update is the updated information. And so dispatching this with update friend of the data, and then doing the same thing of clearing out the input fields. And then so in actions, pretty much the same thing. It's just calling a different route with a different URL, but also passing in data, and then returns the same thing, returns the same action. The action basically has the same shape. And then we've gone through the reducer already. It's doing the same thing, just this route call, this promise here basically does all the work of updating our server. And then we get the server data back, and we just return that to our state tree. And then it makes it back to our components, and we render. What React does the programs commenting to methods to standard method syntax. Field the arrow function syntax call. Yeah, that's definitely yeah. You can do that for sure. So you're saying inside add friend. So you're basically saying here, like on change, you would do instead. Have an anonymous function in here and then do this return. Oh no, you do update friend. Oh, I see. Okay, so you would have it as, instead of handle name change, you just do. Oh, you have to do update friend. No, yeah, I understand. Because in this case though, that would only work if you were mapping that to if you were only like trying to update a single field, like if you only wanted to send off the name, then yeah, you could do that. But then in this case, because we're grabbing from multiple inputs, okay, yeah, if you stuck all these inside of a form and then form on submit, yeah, you could totally do that. You could totally do that. Yeah. That would work just fine as well. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's how you would handle the extra credit portions. Anyone have any questions on that? I mean, I guess in your case, Alan, that approach, the way you did it might be cleaner. But again, like a lot of it has to do with, could just be like personal preference with how you like to write your code. So what you could do instead, Evan, I actually think like calling delete is actually relatively rare. If you actually wanted to just delete something, I think what most people do is they just make either a put or a post and just, you know, specify that index and just like they just actually update it instead, and they just update it to like empty out the fields. I think actually calling an actual delete request is relatively rare. So yeah, again, you could just implement calling delete with like a post or a put call, and it'll pretty much do the exact same thing. Sure. So let's see. Let me just put these into the different Slack channels. So Alon sent his code, and he wanted to show off what he was just talking about with how you can, instead of having the 3 different handle name change, handle age change, et cetera, you could just do it inside of a single like call. So if you look inside of the form they have a form on submit. Let's see. Yep. Okay, so they're basically saying form on submit. They can just call a single function that handles submitting the entire thing instead of having to do like all these different on change functions, which is totally viable as well. So yeah, lots of different ways to implement this. Again, my solution is by no means perfect. That's how we did it as well. Yeah. And so yeah, you know, as you guys get more experience writing code, you'll develop your own preferences and, you know, methodologies for how you like to do things. And so definitely all these different ways of seeing this code written as inspiration, if you will.
Shen, I was meaning more like turn more visible what are the operations in React, because these are like a to-do list way. Oh, you do this because of this, and this is how it happens. It's not visible. We can see exactly what happens. It's too much code, too much actions, too much dispatching, and it keep repeating. In this way, it becomes concise, and everybody can see, oh, now I'm clicking the button. Now I'm submitting the form, and I am having this action here. I'm passing this for this. It turns like more easy to read, more easy to learn.
Yeah, you know, Alon, maybe that works for you, but I want to be more clear with exactly what's going on. And so, yes, while I agree that this is definitely like a more verbose solution, I think it helps people to see more easily what is going on. Instead of like, if you have the code just be shorter and more concise, it's a lot easier. It becomes more difficult to parse for some people. And so that's why I decided to do it this way. But yeah, no, it's a good suggestion though. Okay. If there are no more questions regarding the solution code to remove a friend displayed friend list, you can add active true false and base the display upon the binary state the active field. Yeah, records get displayed. Yeah, exactly. There's different ways to handle deletion for sure. Okay. So we will have sprint review after this at 3, so about 8 minutes. Yeah, if there are no other questions, you guys can look forward to that in a bit. All right, I will see you guys then and talk to you all later. Thanks.